If everything could feel this real forever, if anything could ever be this good again. All right, guys. Been an interesting week. And actually, two things have sort of rejuvenated me with this hobby, and it is a hobby. and it's actually been a lot of fun to a certain extent, right? The first thing I want to throw out there is go to Ghost Critic's channel. He has the Softlands podcast, which is just fascinating and fantastic. He's talking about his life at the time and reading Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and that does not do it justice, but it makes me grin ear to ear. So please go to his channel, find the podcast, get about, I think, 8 minutes in when he actually starts the first one after a little introduction and explanation, because I'm very selfish and I want him to do more of these, okay? That's the first thing that's really pumped me up. The second thing is that the 3 videos before this, and I'm going to show a few more that I got here, is that I found a fantastic deal. One of my friends sent a group message to a bunch of us on Facebook, and I've ended up hitting about 4 or 5 ollies where there's like this DC liquidation sale on hardbacks and trades and soft covers and omnibuses and stuff for like 85 to 90% off. And what was really amazing about those videos I made showing my hauls as I went to the stores and stuff is that it's a small channel. They're not, I didn't expect them to pop, but it was like this energy hit with collecting from people. And it was like they were wanting those videos to kind of be a secret until they got to their ollies and found one and stuff. So I ended up getting comments, direct messages, text, pictures, friends talking, everybody running around. Got to hang out with two of my friends while we did this and stuff like that on 2 different occasions and stuff, of everybody just like getting that thrill of the hunt and going down and getting all these DC books for nothing. And I had pictures sent to me and thanks sent to me, and just it was just like, it was like collecting back in the old days. All of a sudden, man, it was like everybody was getting their books and saying, look what I found, and they were talking and stuff, right? And you got the payoff in the hunt and wondering what was going on and stuff, right? And, right there is like, I ended up getting like about 27 trades, omnibuses and things like that. Super cheap. Hit the piggy bank. I was lucky I had some money for a rainy day, because like I ended up getting the hardback of Batman Planetary for $3.99. You can go back and look at the videos to get the price and stuff. This was originally $22.99 if you bought it brand new. Kind of an odd price for DC. I went ahead and did this. I got the great big huge omnibus of Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC universe. This has Stan Lee coming out, and this was $12.99 for a $75 omnibus. I have all these, but they're collected. And there's no doubt in my mind that Stan Lee used the old Marvel style on this, because there's a Robin story that he did with John Byrne, and it felt like a retelling of The Crow, just except with a Robin, And World's Finest hardback from 1990, Steve Rude, $5. And then this, amazingly, this is probably my most favorite thing that I bought, because this is the Great Disaster Showcase telephone book. I got it for $2.99. But what was amazing about this is that this was announced, and then they said it wasn't coming out. So I actually copied and pasted onto my computer the issues that were going to be in this book, and was actually going to try to find those, because it has the Atomic Knights and Hercules and Weird War Tales and backstories from Kamandi and all this stuff, right? And then I actually got to read The Shade by James Robinson, a book that called back to the 90s, early 2000s Starman, right in the middle of DC 52, and I feel like DC didn't get behind it and actually read. And people were reading their comics. We have Ghost Critic talking about his comics and his experiences and things. I got people out there doing the hunt and stuff, right? So I started thinking a little bit about the YouTube channel, because I really haven't been pumped up for a while. Because of just the environment, the atmosphere has changed when it comes to comics. Things are so politically driven and ideology and all this stuff, right? And I started thinking, before they called them indie comics, they were alternative comics. And that was a big word in the 80s, alternative. You had alternative music. You had 120 minutes on TV. You had people doing alternative lifestyles and stuff. Alternative was a big word. And then all of a sudden, in the early 90s, everybody was alternative, and it ended up being called indie music. And somewhere along the line, comics that were not at the big two, comics that didn't really focus on superheroes, or if they did focus on superheroes, they turned them on their side a little bit. And, they gave them more adult themes, or they just had a different feel to them and stuff. Started becoming indie. And it started making me think about the comic book community here. So I actually was going to do a little research. I was like, I got curious about the history of comics again. And I knew this stuff, but I was wanting it validated. I was like, exactly when did underground comics turn into, alternative comics? And when did alternative comics start getting called indie comics and stuff? Because they're not the same. They're really not the same. And then it started about publishing and stuff. So I ended up getting on Wikipedia, a place that I tell people to tread lightly with. And it's gotten better, but I got on there and I found this great quote by Art Spiegelman. Robert Crumb, Freak Brothers, Art Spiegelman, in the 60s and 70s, and I'm leaving out a bunch, but there was this underground comics and stuff, right? You bought them at head shops. There was a stack in my house and stuff. You don't really know the history of them and stuff, but you end up knowing the names and stuff, right? Art Spiegelman ended up becoming highly acclaimed for his Book of Mouse. And in that, I found this quote by him. Art Spiegelman now, talking about the underground comics of pretty much why they sort of died out. He goes, what seemed like a revolution simply deflated into a lifestyle. Underground comics were stereotyped as dealing only with sex, dope, and cheap thrills. They got stuffed back into the closet with bongs, pipes, and love beads, and things started to get uglier. So what they ended up doing was Spiegelman, I think his wife, I know Crumb was a part of it, but basically what they did is they went after making it more art. They started doing an anthology series called Raw. And at the same time, there was this zeitgeist. You had Dave Sims' Cerebus come out. And this ended up laying the seeds for the big black and white alternative comics. That's what they were called at the time. We call them indie now. Coming out, and you got books like Elf Quest, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Love and Rockets, things that you've heard of, and just so much more. Grimjack, American Flag, this big wave of alternative comics. And when you read them, they felt dangerous and edgy. And Spiegelman and Crumb and them were going back for making them artistic and stuff, right? And that was all there. And it's really wild to sit here and give you 13 years of history there and make it sound like it was one big movement and stuff, man. People were just wanting to be published and get away from corporations and stuff. It was the seeds planted by the underground comics. And it made me think about the YouTube comic book community and comics in general and stuff. And that's kind of where we're at. When Art Spiegelman talked about things getting ugly, I'm sure he had something in mind, but I can remember being a kid at that time. I was born in the early 70s, and I grew up in the period that I've always called the hippies without the love, the 70s and stuff, and what you saw. Now, it was a great time, but you also had to deal with the rising awareness of Vietnam vets with PTSD before there was really a common word for what they were. You got the strung out hippies. You got people who went from experimenting with drugs and the experience and stuff to they were strung out. It's like a freaking wasteland out here. And this is in a small town. You kind of saw it in places everywhere. It was all coming together. And it's got ugly. And I want you to think about the comic books and stuff, right? I've gotten rejuvenated here because people are reading comics they're actually reading and discussing comics. Doomsday Clock, Dark Metal. They're getting these books and they're reading them and it's blowing them away. I've always wondered if people have really been reading their comics for a while, if they're just slabbing them or collecting them and showing them off and stuff, right? Well, it's happening. The other thing is that the thrill of the hunt, people got out, and one of the people that messaged my buddy Tim, he said he just had a conversation with a guy who was thinking about getting out, just because of the way Marvel's been for a while and the whole environment and everything's ugly now. And then I realized, the hobby is going to be okay, but if you read your comic books and you talk about your comic books and you go on the hunt and you're still doing the actual hobby and you're not getting out here and getting politically charged and ideology charged and stuff, you become the new alternative to the hobby. What was once the mainstream of reading the comics and talking about the comics and following your creator, having your favorite character, trading with your buddies, getting out there and hunting and stuff like that, and as you can see, if you do a YouTube video and stuff like that, if you're doing that, your views are probably uh, fine, but could be bigger and stuff. But the bigger views and stuff like that are the people into the comics gate, and they're into the drama and the Twitter drama and the wars and stuff like that. And that's fine. I mean, it's the freaking internet. There's drama attracts people and stuff, and then being able to have an outlet to talk about this stuff, there's an audience for it. So it's not a slam, but it's gone mainstream. You know what I mean? If you're actually just into the comics and wanting to talk about them stuff, you're the new alternative. When this YouTube comic book community started, there was no revolution to it. Okay? It was just a bunch of people like, hey, let's talk comics, and guys kind of being goofy and talking about their comics and bouncing videos off of each other and talking about characters. Commandy got huge there in this stuff, right? And now it's different. Everything's politically charged, and it's gotten ugly. I mean, that's all there is to it. If you come here for your comics, the perception is that it's ugly. And that kind of blows my mind because it's history repeating itself. If you've watched my videos for years and stuff, I'm into history, comic book history. And I'm telling you, history repeats itself, and I think that's where we're at. Think about what people have been talking about for the last couple of years, right? I mean, think about these subjects and stuff, right? And how easily everybody talks about them, how easily everybody points fingers at people, how easily they talk about, race and identity and politics and sexuality and all this stuff, and how many people are doing it on YouTube and stuff, that it's not a revolution for change anymore. It's a lifestyle. It's accepted. If you get online, people are able to talk about these things and not feel a taboo, and the heaviness is lost of this stuff. There's still good change going on. There's still problems in the world, and it has built up some awareness. I mean, there's some positives that's come out of this. But at the same time, it's like the underground comics, man. I've always talked about the cultural movement that's coming, the cultural change. As time goes by, it's you can't fight it. It can't be stopped. Time goes forward, and so there's always going to be a cultural change. But with the coming of the internet and stuff like that, change that used to take 10 years can happen in 6 months. You know what I mean? New trends come in, and you can hear some horrible news one day, and seriously, the next day up to like a week or something like that, you're already hearing some other terrible news, and people have forgotten about that. It moves very fast. So if you're a comic book collector and you read your comics and you're here to talk about your comics and show off your comic stuff, you're the new alternative. That's all there is to it. And the movement that's going on now with cultural change going forward, this thing has become a lifestyle. Seriously, I mean, think about it. Think about the news. Think about celebrities. Think about the movements that are going on. The way people can just talk about this stuff and it feels normal. You know what I mean? They've talked about it so much and everybody's talking about it, it feels normal and stuff. It's to me, it really does feel like an era or a movement that doesn't know it's dead yet, and it's got 5 steps and it's going to fall. You know what I mean? I mean, it's going to, it's going to stick around. It's not going to completely disappear and stuff like that. But I just want people to feel like, to think about these things, that if you're into the hobby, there's still hunts to have. There's still people out there that are reading their comics. They're talking to people, even if it's not online and stuff, because the hobby has so much more to offer than what you can show online. It's actually like about people and those stories you connect to, the art of it. Underground comics sort of died out, became indie, and the reason that indie survived, and we know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because they went towards the art and back to like the purity of what the comics, were. It was about artists and creativity and things like that. There's room for everything out there. There's room for things that if you want to be politically charged. I think you can do this hobby and have grown-up topics every now and then. And I said grown-up, I know. And at the same time, because would it be very hypocritical for me to say be a pure comic book collector when I have talked about things, politics and ideology and movements and what's going on in the world, and I have also used comic books to talk about life in general, and they're sort of like a metaphor or an outlet. You know what I mean? I've gotten a little philosophical. That's what I mean. There's room for everything. Comic books, reading, painting, any kind of hobby you have, anything that you have a passion for, there's a passion there because they emotionally churn you up, and you have to get that out sometimes. Creativity sparks creativity. Just don't let it become a lifestyle to where there's no spark there, to where it becomes stale, where you start hearing the same things over and over and over and over. Westerns used to be big, but it was nothing but westerns. People have been talking about comic books being just dominated by superheroes and stuff like that, and eventually that's going to grow stale. You have crime comics, genres, things like that. Life's the same way, man. You got to mix it up, have different things in there, different stuff to talk about, and stuff, right? But creativity can kind of lead you that way. It'll make you creative. You know what I mean? So anyway, just a few thoughts. I probably have a lot more I could say and talk about and stuff, man. But but comic book wise, it's been a good week. YouTube wise, I think it's been a good week. Hope you guys have a good week.